in California. This is 29-year-old Jonathan Rinderknecht, who had been living in Melbourne, according to investigators, but facing charges in connection with that deadly fire in California. They also pointed to some AI-generated images that they say they had found on his phone. So we will get into all of that in just a couple of minutes. But we are going to get ready to take a break here. We'll be back at 2 o'clock. We'll welcome in our TV audience on Fox 35, and then we've got a lot to cover in the next hour. So we hope you keep it here on Fox Local, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Florida Live starts now.
I wish we could get into somebody's head, but we can't. People do evil things for whatever reason. And I'm not going to speculate or go into anything of that. Like, we have evidence of that will be addressed in trial, but evil people do evil things.
Well, that was the word from the investigators in California today, announcing a Florida man facing federal charges in connection with the deadly Palisades wildfire that killed 12 people in the Los Angeles area over the winter. Good afternoon to you. I'm Garrett Weimer, and we appreciate you joining us here on Florida Live on this Wednesday afternoon, live on Fox Local, YouTube, and on Fox 35. The breaking news today is that 29-year-old Jonathan Rinderknecht, a man from Melbourne, living in Melbourne, is now facing charges, and at this hour is in federal court at the courthouse in Orlando. This is a live look at the federal courthouse there, where the suspect was due in court at 1:30 for his initial appearance. There's a lot to get into with this, so I just wanted to start off by letting you hear it from the investigators, announcing a little bit about what they found and how they were led to this suspect, 29-year-old Jonathan Rinderknecht, arrested at his home in Melbourne. Here is investigators speaking at this news conference just a little bit ago that if you were watching with us on Fox Local, we did bring to you live. Here is that some of that news conference as they made that announcement.
Rinderknecht, as the U.S. Attorney mentioned, is charged under Title 18-844F, malicious destruction by means of a fire of real property owned by an organization receiving federal financial assistance. I know this community has endured a long wait for answers. Families have carried an unmanageable grief, and an entire community has been left to heal while living with questions. Although we cannot share every detail of this investigation, it is still an active investigation, and judicial proceedings remain ahead. I can tell you this: from day one, ATF and our partners have been relentless. We made a promise to find answers, and we have kept that promise. To give you a sense of the work, I want to highlight the extraordinary level of cooperation between ATF and our partners: the Los Angeles City Fire Department, the Los Angeles Police Department, the Orange County Fire Authority, and the United States Forest Service. LA City Fire asked for our assistance, and within 24 hours, ATF's National Response Team arrived on scene. The NRT, ATF's NRT, is an elite team comprised of certified fire investigators, electrical and fire protection engineers, chemists, accelerant detection canine teams, and other experts. We arrived within 24 hours and got to work with our partners. We processed hundreds of acres of damaged fire, examining every inch for the smallest clue. Over the course of the last 8 months, investigators conducted hundreds of interviews, including witnesses overseas, and pursued more than 200 leads. We collected more than 13,000 items of evidence, including fire debris, digital data, DNA samples, all analyzed by ATF's state-of-the-art forensic lab. Our team carried out 500 scientific tests, supported by ATF's Fire Research Lab, the nation's only large-scale fire science lab dedicated to fire investigations. More than 10 of our top engineers and support staff contributed to this laboratory analysis. This investigation has been documented over 300 ATF reports, including a 200-page report detailing the origin and cause of this investigation. ATF technical surveillance specialists were integral in reviewing approximately 1.5 million phone records and data extracted from digital evidence. And I highlight this because I know there's questions on the length that it took us to come to this conclusion. But we were reviewing a lot of evidence from one of the most catastrophic fires in the U.S. history. Through this extraordinary team effort, investigators determined that the Palisades fire, reported on January 7th, was caused by an intentionally set fire near a viewpoint along the Temescal Ridge Trail in Topanga State Park on January 1st. The fire was a holdover fire, meaning it was deeply seated in dense vegetation and roots and continued to burn undetected until catastrophic weather ensued, resulting in the Palisades fire. Rinderknecht is now charged with setting the January 1 fire. We know this arrest cannot erase the pain or grief or losses endured, but we hope it is a step forward. It is proof that justice will not be forgotten, that our accountability will be pursued by ATF and our partners, no matter how complex the investigation and no matter how long it takes. To the families who lost so much, we hear you, we honor you, and we will continue to fight for you. The ATF established an email address for the victims and witnesses to contact ATF Victim Witnesses Assistance Program through the Palisades at atf.gov. I know there's been speculation of other ignition sources, and I just want to assure everyone, ATF did not identify this suspect and focus specifically on the suspect. We still utilize our scientific process. And part of the lengthy time that it took to go over the thousands of acres that were burnt is we literally had agents with our partners on their hands and knees crawling through fire debris. They're observing fire behavior patterns. They're flagging patterns. An example of that, fire will cause natural debris to twist and freeze in a position pointing to the origin. So looking at all those fire patterns, flagging those, ATF was able to zone to specifically get into the origin of where that fire started from. Once they dialed into the origin, using all the investigative techniques that they have, then they start really dialing into that very specific spot that fire was created. An example of a fire research lab, they collected buckets and buckets of debris, flammable materials, natural and otherwise, found within that area, sent it off to a fire research lab. They analyzed data from the weather, including humidity, the exact temperature, the exact composition of those natural fuels found at that particular time, January 1st, at that particular time, recreated those environmental factors in our labs using their scientific process, then tested different ignition sources. And that's where 500 tests were conducted at that lab. That review process is then looked at by a panel of our experts in a peer review process to see if the science matches up with the theory and the actual evidence that was collected. I know it was also broadcast. We broadcasted it as a public safety announcement back in spring. We went up and recreated a fire very safely with our partners with LA Fire, using butane and scientific process to create the fire behavior to see, and I'll tell you, to the extent of the scientific expertise that we went through, we recreated it in the exact lunar time that the fire started, meaning the exact size the moon was, and as close to the starlit environment that fire started. So we could recreate scientifically a fire and see how fixed surveillance points saw that fire as it developed from other evidence that we collected, both from witnesses' phones, fixed surveillance points, and other data. We were able to see how that fire behaved, how it grew, the size of that behavior and that fire, and the size that it would be for witnesses to see it and report it. We went through exhaustive efforts to look at potential ignition sources, whether they were fireworks, whether they were down power lines.
That was the investigators talking about some of how they were able to figure out and what led them to that suspect, 29-year-old Jonathan Rinderknecht. You're now seeing some video of the aftermath and the devastation that was left behind in the aftermath of that Palisades fire. Again, 12 people were killed, a number of livelihoods ruined as well. You see just the flames that burned out of control. Now that fire, that Palisades fire, began January 7th, and one of the questions that was asked of those investigators were how they were able to kind of connect the fire on January 7th to the one on January 1st that this suspect is accused of starting. And so that's one of the things I want to highlight for you out of the criminal complaint that talks about this charges. This is the official court document that is used to charge the 29-year-old suspect in this case. And here it says, although the LAFD quickly suppressed the fire that started on January 1st, it says, unbeknownst to anyone, the fire continued to smolder and burn underground within the root structure of dense vegetation. And then it was a week later, January 7th, that heavy winds caused the underground fire to surface and spread above ground in what became the Palisades fire. A couple of other things I want to highlight for you from this criminal complaint and the reasoning that they kind of put. The investigators did not talk about a motive during this news conference earlier today. They said they have evidence of that they will present at trial, but there are a couple of interesting things in this criminal complaint that I want to show you. And one of them is this song that they say that the records indicate that Rinderknecht had listened to 9 times in the 4 days leading up to this. The music video showing the main character lighting things on fire, saying that he had watched that music video 3 times in the previous 4 days. It also talks about Rinderknecht, who they say was working as an Uber driver that night, dropped off a couple of passengers who said he had seemed angry and agitated, and then going to the trailhead. I want to show you in this criminal complaint as well surveillance video that they say shows the beginning of that fire, some of the first images of it caught on surveillance cameras as well that you see there. And then later on in the complaint, if I'm scrolling down, bear with me here, scrolling just on the browser here to page 18, where it talks about the suspect screen recording as he went down the hill. He had tried to call 911 several times, according to investigators, and this says he made a 3-minute screen recording on his iPhone, recording himself attempting to call 911 several times and asking ChatGPT, "Are you at fault if a fire is lit because of your cigarettes?" We should note elsewhere in the criminal complaint, investigators say they have ruled out cigarettes as the cause of the fire. They say in this complaint, based on my training and experience in this investigation, this indicates that Rinderknecht wanted to preserve evidence of himself trying to assist in the suppression of the fire, and he wanted to create evidence regarding a more innocent explanation for the cause of the fire. The complaint also talks about 6 months before the fire started. They believe he had used ChatGPT to create these images of a world on fire, and the criminal complaint goes into the details of what that prompt was that he exactly had typed in, according to investigators, and that gives a little bit more information of potentially what may have been going on in the minds, a dystopian painting. And you can see the image that ChatGPT created, according to investigators, and that is included in this criminal complaint. So again, to give you a live look outside the courthouse right now, Fox 35's Randy Hildreth is inside that courtroom as well for this hearing. We are hoping to be able to speak with her in this hour once she gets out to give us an update on what happens inside. We are going to take a quick break here on Florida Live. We still have a lot to get to. Here's a little bit about what you can expect for the rest of the show. So keep it right here on Fox Local, YouTube, and on Fox 35. We'll be right back after this. A live look right now at the federal courthouse in downtown Orlando, waiting to hear some new information about the 29-year-old Jonathan Rinderknecht in court this afternoon. If you look closely, you can see a lot of camera crews around the curb there, the sidewalk, waiting outside, including one of our Fox 35 photographers. We do have a reporter inside that courtroom and hope to bring you updates coming up in the next little bit. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Weimer. We appreciate you joining us this afternoon on this Wednesday, live on Fox Local, YouTube, and on Fox 35. It was a busy afternoon of breaking news on Fox Local if you were joining us for that. And we're doing our best to get you caught up here on Fox 35 if you weren't. It is time now, though, for our Tampa Connection, and for that we go to Fox 13 digital content producer Nancy Gay, who joins us live from the Fox 13 Tampa Bay newsroom. And Nancy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Garrett. Well, we're learning more information about what happened last night when a suspect who was in Tampa police custody was hit and killed by a car. Tampa Police Chief Lee Bearcaw, he just wrapped up a press conference moments ago, and he said this whole thing actually started around 1 o'clock yesterday when a man said that he saw another man breaking into his car. Now, the owner of that car said he confronted this man, and that's when the suspect left carrying a bag and a skateboard. Moments later, the owner of that car realized that his backpack was missing. And the reason why that is important, Garrett, is because that backpack had a loaded 9mm gun inside of it. Now, just after 8 o'clock last night, officers who were on patrol, they saw someone they believed could be that man who was accused of breaking into that car earlier in the day. They saw the suspect near MacDill Park, and Chief Bearcaw said that when these officers asked the suspect for his identification, he pulled out crack cocaine. That's why they detained him on a drug charge. He said that the officers handcuffed the suspects and placed him on a park bench. That's when the police chief said the suspect told the officers that he wasn't going back to jail today and that today could be the day that he dies. Now, that suspect took off. He stood up. He took off running. And the officers who took a knife away from him earlier in the day, they were concerned for the safety of the community, and they used a taser on that suspect. Now, keep in mind, the suspect was handcuffed at the time. That suspect fell to the ground and was struck by a passing car. Now, Chief Bearcaw says despite the officers' life-saving attempts, that suspect did die. Now, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, they are taking the lead on the in-custody death investigation. That's per the department's policy. And Tampa Police, they're handling the crash investigation. The chief noted that the driver of that vehicle did stay on the scene and was cooperative with police. Those 4 police officers who were involved in this incident, they've been placed on administrative review as part of the investigation, and that is standard protocol. Garrett?
All right, so some new details on that situation just coming from that news conference. Nancy, our second story in the Tampa Connection, and this one a heartwarming story out of Pasco County.
Yes, this is definitely heartwarming. The video is amazing. A 17-year-old boy is being hailed as a hero after deputies say that he rescued his sister, a 5-year-old little girl who is nonverbal and has autism. They said that he rescued her from a lake. Now, on Monday afternoon, the Pasco County Sheriff's Office got a phone call about a missing 5-year-old girl who did have autism and is nonverbal. And when deputies arrived at that park, witnesses told them that the child was in a nearby lake. So those deputies raced to the lake, and they found that the girl's 17-year-old brother had already entered the water and had the child in a safe location on a branch as he remained in that water. The deputies helped recover both of the siblings and commended the teen for being so courageous. Garrett?
Wow, absolutely incredible. You're right, that video is something to see, but no doubt a hero. My goodness.
Yeah, he's definitely a hero. I mean, it looks like he didn't even think twice when he learned that his sister was in the water. He went right into that lake and made sure that she was safe by placing her up on that branch, keeping her above the water, and he remained in the water until those deputies were able to come and help both of those siblings.
All right, and finally, Nancy, in our Tampa Connection here, another odd story out of course, Polk County.
Yes, this is definitely an odd story out of Polk County, and this has been one of our top stories all morning. Now, this is all about a Florida man who is no stranger to the law, and he is now back behind bars, and he's getting a lot of attention because of what was found inside of him as he was getting body scanned to go back into the Polk County jail. Now, Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd said this all started when deputies got a call about a man. That man was later identified as Walter Freimeyer. They got a call that he was naked at a park, but when they showed up, the deputy said he was fully clothed. So that deputy escorted Freimeyer off the property and gave him a warning. He said, "I'm not going to arrest you, but you got to leave the property and keep your clothes on." So Freimeyer didn't take that as a lucky break, and instead he went across the street and jumped on a set of railroad tracks, and that's when the deputy arrested him.
Put everybody through a body scanner to make sure that they're not trying to bring guns and knives and drugs into the jail. Well, you might have thought Walter was bringing drugs into the jail. He brought a thermos into the jail. That's right. He put it up the exit ramp. You know what I mean? A thermos about this size. No, it wasn't this one.
Freimeyer had to be taken to an area hospital. That's where a specialist had to be called in to help remove that thermos, which he said had been inside of him for about the past 24 hours. Now, Sheriff Judd, he said that that deputy likely saved Freimeyer's life because he was eventually taken to the hospital where he did have that thermos removed. And Judd said that Freimeyer, he actually threatened the deputy as he was getting arrested, but as he just said, that deputy likely saved his life. And Judd did note that Freimeyer has 25 prior arrests and has been to state prison 5 times. Garrett?
I don't think I have anything more to say about that one. Fox 13 digital content producer Nancy Gay, we appreciate you joining us for our Tampa Connection.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break here on Florida Live, but we'll be right back after this. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Weimer, and thanks for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon, live on Fox Local and on YouTube. A lot of talk continues about property taxes. That's ahead of the legislative session here in Florida, where we know that's going to be a top priority and a main push, spurred on by the governor, who wants to see the state at least significantly reduce, if not eliminate, property taxes. It's something that he and CFO Blaise Ngolia continue to talk about anytime they are out holding news conferences, and yesterday was no exception. Here's a little bit of what they had to say.
People are getting pinched on property taxes in this state. They have a home that they bought for $250,000 10 years ago. Now they're being told it's worth $750,000, and they have to pay more in tax every year. Even if they don't even raise the millage rate, just the valuation change as an unrealized gain is pinching people. You have senior citizens that have to sell home because they don't have the ability to keep paying the taxes on the house. You have young people. I mean, it's obviously very expensive across the board on a lot of things. Home prices in particular have gone up dramatically over the last 3 or 4, and that's nationwide. It's not just Florida. Wouldn't it be great if they were able to have relief and not be burdened by that? So we're working. You got to do a ballot initiative, 2026 election, November. We're working through all that. But people said, well, how are you going to be able to do rural? Like they don't have the ability to just, because, Miami, they can just, reduce spending. They can do tourist stuff. I mean, there's a lot that they could do. Like, they can't do that. And I said, they don't have to do anything. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I can fund all that. I can take all 32 fiscally constrained counties. I could fund 100% of tax revenue that would be derived from a homestead, Florida residence, property taxes. And it's like budget dust for us.
Since entering this office as CFO, I have been on a mission to highlight the excessive and the wasteful spending of local government in an effort to make the case for serious property tax reform, including the elimination of property taxes on homesteaded properties altogether.
So an ongoing discussion, but what would that look like? What options would there be if local property taxes are repealed? That is the subject of a really interesting piece published on the Tax Foundation. And joining us live now to talk about that is the research studies author, and that is Jared Walczak, who is the Vice President of State Projects with the Tax Foundation. And Jared, really appreciate you joining us here on Florida Live this afternoon.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, Jared, just to talk to us a little bit about the premise of your piece and what you looked at. I know it wasn't specific to Florida, but you did look at some of the numbers in Florida. Just talk to us about kind of what precipitated this piece of yours.
Yeah, so in a lot of states, this property tax elimination discussion is ongoing. And what we frequently see is there's a lot of conversation about how great it might be if there were no property taxes, and not nearly as much conversation about what would replace that revenue. Now, you may not need to replace all of it. I know in Florida, there's talk about maybe governments could do with less, and that's a difficult conversation, but a conversation that can be had. But property taxes are the primary source of local tax revenue. You have to replace a substantial portion of this. So our paper looks at what would that mean? What would it mean if you replaced it with, say, local sales taxes in each jurisdiction? What would it mean if you replaced it with a statewide sales tax? For other states, we also looked at income taxes, not as relevant to Florida. So what would those rates have to be? And if the state provided this, what would it mean for the state to then allocate that, distribute it back out to jurisdictions? Because that has a lot of effects on the fiscal capacity of jurisdictions. It affects, growth factors. You're no longer using assessed values in the future, so you can't just give them what they would have in property taxes. You have to choose some other formula that can have really interesting restrictions and changes in the composition of revenues across the state.
And so what did you find here in Florida when you kind of dove into the numbers? What did you discover?
If statewide Florida was to add on to the sales tax to replace property tax revenue, you'd be looking at about a 15.3% all-in sales tax. If you had each county replace the property tax that they levy with their own sales tax, that would range from 9.8% in a small county near Tallahassee that has a truck stop in it, to 32.5% in a county that is very much a rural agricultural community. So you'd have this broad range, a lot with land in the 17% range, including places like Miami-Dade. So you'd have a lot of variation. It would be very hard. Bedroom communities just don't have the ability to really raise this revenue from a sales tax. Agricultural communities don't. Your large retail concentration areas might be able to. So the governor says, well, that's not going to work, and he's right. So the governor says the state would replace it. But what happens when the state replaces it? And we look at that too. Are you going to use the prior year's property tax collections and just replace that in perpetuity? Then you're rewarding the highest tax jurisdictions in the past. They're getting more money forever because they used to have higher taxes. Is that what we want? Are you going to use a different formula where you're maybe going to use just population and then you have radically different distributions than you used to have? Some have way more revenue, some have way less. And what do you do in the future? You can't use assessed values anymore. So potentially, in some of the designs we've seen in a lot of states being discussed, as your population grew, the revenue you got from the state would spread thin. So you'd actually be encouraged to shrink. You'd need your population to decline so that you would have enough revenue. And that seems like a really poor approach.
So how does this inform this discussion that we are having? And as lawmakers kind of really start to dive into this issue more and look at it, what do these numbers kind of tell us, and how can they guide our thinking about this over the next few months as we continue to hear about it?
In Florida and across the country, I think we're only having half a conversation right now. We're hearing about the benefits. Wouldn't it be great not to have a property tax? And while there's some conversation about how we would backfill that, how we'd replace it, it's not a fleshed out conversation. So what we wanted to do is put real numbers on that, to take Florida and other states thinking about property tax elimination and say, here's what the replacement rates would have to be. Here's what the economic implications of those much higher rates would be. Here's what it would look like if you were doing this at the local level. Here are the challenges if you did this at the state level and distributed it back. We just wanted to put real meaningful numbers on this so that the general public and lawmakers can be looking at the whole picture, can say, do I want to eliminate the property tax if it means a 15.3% sales tax? Do I want to eliminate the property tax if it means that some jurisdictions get way less revenue than they generate right now and are subsidizing perhaps jurisdictions that had higher taxes in the past or that have different levels of population or different levels of affluence? Is that what we want or not? Do we want that lack of local control? These are difficult questions, but we can't even begin to talk about them until we have some numbers. And I think this conversation has been lacking those until now.
What do these numbers do to, you touched on this a few minutes ago, but what do these numbers do to address the question of, well, governments can just and should just reduce their spending and then they will be okay?
Florida already spends less per capita at both the state and local level than a lot of jurisdictions, and I think that's great. And there's probably more to do. I am certainly not going to gainsay the idea that local government, state government can tighten belts. But how much can you tighten? You do have to have local revenue to be able to fund the local share of roads and schools and law enforcement and emergency services and all of the services that are important to local communities. The property tax is the primary source of tax revenue. So it's one thing to say, could you do with less of it? It's a radically different question to say, could you do without it? That's just not realistic. The governor recognizes that. Policymakers talking about this recognize that the state would have to come through or provide additional tax authority. But you can't just reduce spending out of your way, in your way to get rid of the property tax. You'd have nothing to fund government with functionally.
Oh, so what is the main takeaway here, Jared?
I think the takeaway really is that the cure may be worse than the disease. That, sure, no one likes the property tax. It's not anyone's favorite tax, but it's a relatively economically efficient tax. Anything else is going to hurt economic growth more, and Florida's a state that cares a lot about economic growth. It's going to create huge distortions and what economists call perverse incentives for jurisdictions to not really provide what local populations want anymore because of the incentive structure from the state. That basically, you may not like what you have. You may find you really don't like what you could get.
Well, it's an interesting contribution to the conversation. Some really interesting points to see when you see those numbers and that data. And no matter where folks watching kind of fall on this issue, I would encourage them to read that and look at your paper, and then you can find that on taxfoundation.org. Jared Walczak, the Vice President of State Projects with Tax Foundation, I really appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us this afternoon here on Florida Live.
Well, thank you for having me.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Florida Live after this. Welcome back into Florida Live. I'm Garrett Weimer, and thanks for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon, live on Fox Local, YouTube, and on Fox 35. The puck has dropped on the 2025-26 NHL hockey season that began yesterday. The Florida Panthers, among the 3 games yesterday, they started their season with a win as they looked for yet another championship. One of the teams hoping to stand in their way this year is the Tampa Bay Lightning. We will certainly see about that. An exciting season ahead. And here to talk about that and also preview the Lightning's first game tomorrow, Eric Erlandson. He's the founder of Lightning Insider, joining us live now via Zoom. And Eric, we appreciate you joining us this afternoon here on Florida Live.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Exciting time of year. We're talking the start of hockey season. Just talk to us, we know the Lightning lost to the Panthers last year in the playoffs, and they had a relatively quiet off season. So just kind of give me your overall thoughts on what happened in the off season to kind of bring us here to the start of this season for the Lightning.
Well, if familiarity breeds success, the Lightning have a lot of familiarity. Didn't make many changes to the roster, brought in Pontus Holmberg. They got a couple of young players, Jack Finley, Max Crozier, who have seen NHL time before in limited roles, have made the roster coming out of camp. So, yeah, not a lot of changes. I think the Lightning feel very confident about the team they have. I mean, when you've got Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov and Jake Gensel, Brandon Hagel, Anthony Cirelli, your top 5 forwards in particular are among, the best group in the league in terms of your top 5. And there's a lot of familiarity on defense as well, right? You got Victor Hedman coming back for his, I think, 15th season with Tampa Bay. J.J. Moser's back, Ryan McDonough, Eric Chernak. It's a lot of players who are very familiar with each other, and I think that helps create the continuity on the ice, and it's almost instant chemistry, and chemistry is such an important factor in hockey. So there's a lot of belief and a lot of confidence within that room that they can be a team that once again is going to compete. And now I guess it just depends on whether they actually end up meeting the Florida Panthers once again in the postseason.
Yeah, let's talk about them and the Panthers a little bit, because they had a really I'm not sure what word to use to describe that last postseason game, but it was unlike anything I think I'd seen before.
Yeah, I haven't seen too many games like that myself, and I've been around for a while. 326, I think, combined penalty minutes they had. That was in just one game. You don't see that too often in the NHL anymore. And that was on top of the 186 they had combined in the previous game on Thursday that was up in Tampa. So, yeah, there's definitely a rivalry there, and I think it goes beyond just the state and the proximity. Certainly meeting each other, I think, 4 times in the last 5 postseasons adds to it. I think the way that the playoff series went last year with the Brandon Hagel hit on Sasha Barkov and the Ekblad hit in retaliation on Hagel, that certainly spilled over. And it's going to be very interesting to see how both teams view the first regular season meeting, which is going to come November 15th, between these two teams, and how that's going to play out. Because there was a lot of message sending that went on in these past 2 games. The Lightning felt that the Panthers kind of, had some late and dirty hits in that playoff series against the Panthers. And, and A.J. Greer thinks it's not over with Hagel, so he delivers a little bit of a sucker punch, and it just created an entire spark. So definitely a big rivalry between these two teams right now. And it was interesting to see. I've never, like I said, in 25 years of covering the league, that was 1970s style hockey, 1980s style hockey.
It was brash, and it was in your face. That is for sure. So we've heard Florida really kind of being called the hockey capital the past couple of years because of the success of the Panthers and the Lightning as well. I want to get your take on the Lightning's chances this year, and if this could be a year that they bring back the Stanley Cup.
I think they're as good as any team in the Eastern Conference. A lot of it is going to factor on the health of Andrei Vasilevskiy in net. Right, he missed 10 days in training camp. He didn't get his first preseason game until that game on Saturday against the Panthers. He sounds like he's ready to go, but we'll wait and see. They're carrying 3 goalies on their roster to start the season, which is a little unusual for teams to do, as they picked up Phoenix Copley off of waivers from the LA Kings last week. So a lot of their success is going to hinge on him. He's coming off a year in which he set a career best in goals against average at 2.18. He's a workhorse. They're going to have to find ways to try and slow him down a little bit. I don't think they want him playing 60 games if they can help it. They want to kind of keep him healthy and rested as much for the playoffs. But if you look at this roster as a whole, I just rattled off. Jake Gensel's a 40-goal scorer. Braden Point's a 40-goal scorer. Brandon Hagel's a 35-goal scorer. Nikita Kucherov is a 100-point performer on a yearly basis. They are as deep as they've ever been in a long time, going back to when they were winning cups in 2020 and 2021 and getting the final in 22. I think some of that depth has returned. I think that's why they're so high and bullish on kind of how this season can go for them, because they have the depth to complement their top players. And if you look at their statistics last year during the regular season, led the league in goals scored. They were a top 6 team in defense. They were a top 5 team in power play, a top 5 team in penalty kill. Their 5-on-5 game was among the best. So if that carries over into this season, they will be right there once again with the top teams in the league. And with the NHL, sometimes your playoff fate is determined by the matchup. And last year, we all said whoever won that matchup between the Panthers and the Lightning was probably going to go on to get to the Stanley Cup final, and it came true, just not in the Lightning's favor.
Yeah, well, exciting times ahead. Eric Erlandson, founder of Lightning Insider, we appreciate you joining us to talk about the start of the season.
All right, thanks, Garrett. Thanks for having me on.
And we should note that if you're watching us in Orlando, the Orlando home of the Tampa Bay Lightning is Fox 35 Plus, WRBW. Be able to watch many of those Lightning games on that channel. We're going to take a quick break here on Florida Live, but we'll be right back. A live look right now at the federal courthouse in downtown Orlando, where 29-year-old Jonathan Rinderknecht was due in court just a few minutes ago. Welcome back into Florida Live. Garrett Weimer here, and thanks for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon, live on Fox Local, YouTube, and on Fox 35. Fox 35's Randy Hildreth was inside the courtroom and joins us live now via Zoom. Randy, can you tell us what happened in court and what you saw today?
Yeah, so Mr. Rinderknecht entered the courtroom about 2:05 and is being represented by a public defender, attorney Aziza Hawthorne. And when he entered the courtroom, a pretty lengthy discussion with his attorney, obviously going over what he is charged with and the documentation connected to what he has been charged with. And at one point, I saw him scan the courtroom, have another conversation with his attorney. And at that point, she went over to talk with court officials, and a message was then sent to the judge because I believe she requested to have all of his hearings rescheduled for tomorrow. So he had his first appearance today. We were expecting to get more information with a preliminary hearing, potentially a bond hearing. They also do what's called an identity hearing where they have to verify who he is. That has all been rescheduled for tomorrow morning at 9:45. So the meat of what we were hoping to find out today, a little bit more about his background, we did not learn in court today. So everyone will be back here tomorrow morning to get more information as they walk through more specifics about his charges. In court today, there was as I look at my notes, a Thomas Harrison, a special agent with the ATF, presumably in place, ready to testify if that preliminary hearing had moved forward. But again, everyone will be back here tomorrow as these proceedings move forward. In terms of his temperament in court today, he was calm. He, spoke very directly to the judge, and some of the questioning that the judge has prepared for today, what she asks everyone when they appear in court is, do they understand the charges that they are facing? Do they understand the potential punishment if they are found guilty of this crime? And he spoke very clearly to the judge, saying that he understands what he has been charged with, and it was very calm. The judge asked a little bit about his background. We understand that he is originally from Indiana, and asked about his education experience. He says he obtained a high school diploma, asked about mental illness, said that, that is not a factor for him. And so really just, got a little bit more information about him. But tomorrow, when we come back to court, expect to get a lot more information about him and the case. Just to give you context, I'm standing right outside of the building. We have the news crew set up behind me. You can see them there. We were hoping to catch his attorney and Assistant U.S. Attorney, who is in court today, to see if we can get any additional interviews with them to find out, one, more about why she was wanting to reschedule the hearing for tomorrow, and to find out more information about Mr. Rinderknecht. At this point, they have not exited the building, but we're hanging out here to see if we can get some information and potentially an interview with them.
All right, to Fox 35's Randy Hildreth, we appreciate the update this afternoon from federal court in Orlando.
Thank you.
And as she said, we will obviously be back in the courtroom tomorrow and bring you those updates as well. 9:45, she said, when that hearing is rescheduled for tomorrow. So much more to come with that story as we continue to follow those developments. Well, we still have a few more minutes with you here on Florida Live, and let's talk a little theme parks, because quite a bit of news coming out today. Some of it good, some of it exciting, some of it not so exciting, especially for your wallet. But joining us now to break all of this down for us is Theron White. He's the lead publisher of EYNTK.info. Theron, always good talking with you, and we appreciate you joining us this afternoon here on Florida Live.
Of course, happy to join as always.
All right, so let's start with the not so good news, and that is the price hikes on tickets and annual passes at Disney. What do we know?
So this is something we expect every single year. It's pretty usual when Disney ends their fiscal quarter that they're going to increase the prices at least somewhat. But the thing that's really kind of getting people this time is it is the first time ever that Magic Kingdom's peak park ticketing pricing is going to go over $200. So if you're wanting to visit Magic Kingdom on Christmas week, you should expect to spend at least $200 per person in your family. That's a big price jump. I mean, the fact that we were talking about a $100 price ticket about 15 years ago, the fact that we've now doubled that price, not for every day, but for these really, really high peak days, something like 4th of July, the middle of spring break, Christmas itself, that's a big number. And it's something that's definitely people are kind of harboring on right now. They've also increased the price of their annual passes by about 4%. But I've said it before and I'll say it again, I don't think the pricing on really the lower tier of the annual passes is that bad. I think they're kind of a good deal if you're a Florida resident. But for anyone that's planning to get some tickets around Christmas, your price went up. I hope you bought before this.
When it comes to the passes there, and this was something that I raised earlier as well, I've been seeing some folks on social media saying, well, there's construction walls up everywhere right now, and you've gotten rid of some of the perks for pass holders. So why raise the price, and kind of criticizing it from that perspective? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, so I mean, what we're seeing, at least with the annual passes, is that there is about a 4% increase. When you look at inflation and stuff like that, it's usually 2 to 3%, and the price for everything goes up. You can't really complain online as much about when it comes to your electric bills. You can talk about it, but Disney's really this hot subject where it's very easy to point at them and say, why would you increase your prices? Everybody's increasing their prices, and while I would like for it to stay lower, honestly, when I look at the lowest tier pass, which is the one I have, it's $489 now is what this cost is. Especially when you look at the new price for a standard ticket, $489 to be able to visit Walt Disney World on about 60-70% of all days throughout the year, compared to visiting Magic Kingdom just one time. I don't think $489 is that bad. I understand if you have a family of like 6 or 7, those prices can pile up pretty quick. But again, $489, you can go again and again and again to these parks. You can see fireworks 5 times a week. You can go and see the parades. So from my personal perspective, I don't mind paying that lowest tier price, but the highest end tier price now is about $1,600. All of that to say, I mean, if you're going to be going to Magic Kingdom or something like that on Christmas Day, you're going to expect to pay some really high prices. I just say, especially as a cast member who used to work there, don't go Christmas week. It's chaos. The park's amazing. Go a little bit earlier and celebrate Christmas then.
Now let's shift gears here quickly and talk about some new animatronics as well that are going to refresh some rides at Disney.
Yeah, over at Epcot, the animatronics on Frozen Ever After are going to get completely redone to kind of look like the ones that we have that just debuted over at Hong Kong Disneyland. If you've been on this ride before, it was one of the first Frozen attractions. They had projection faces, and the faces weren't bad, but they certainly weren't great, and it looks like Disney's going back now and really plussing that ride up. It's a great change in my opinion.
And also quickly, some new details about the animatronics for Zootopia.
Yes, so we knew that the Zootopia Better Zoogether was going to be opening up later this year at Disney's Animal Kingdom. Pass holders are actually going to be able to get into that attraction 2 days early with the virtual queue system, which is quite nice. But we've got this right here, this first look at Clawhauser. He is going to be one of the animatronics inside of the show. This is going to be where the Bug Show was previously at Animal Kingdom. So the fact that we're getting another animatronic back, we're learning more about this. It's a new thing that's going to be adding into this park, and I'm happy to see it because Animal Kingdom right now, as you said earlier, has a lot of construction walls up right now.
Got about a minute left, but we're also getting an idea of what Christmas is going to look like at Epic Universe.
Yes, so Universal has officially confirmed that 2 of their lands will get Christmas decorations. That's going to be Celestial Park as well as the Harry Potter Ministry of Magic Land. The Harry Potter lands during Christmas already look incredible, so I can't wait to see kind of the French Paris version of what they're going to go for. And of course, Celestial Park is fantastic. I'm hoping that we get some kind of updated fountain show for Christmas as well.
The holidays at the theme parks are always exciting, certainly a special time to be there and experience some of that. Well, Theron White, lead publisher of EYNTK.info, we always appreciate your time and your expertise, and thanks for joining us this afternoon here on Florida Live.
Absolutely. You all have a great day.
And we appreciate you for joining us as well here on Florida Live this afternoon, live on Fox Local, YouTube, and on Fox 35. We are here weekdays from 2 to 3 p.m. on Fox 35, but we stream before and after on Fox Local and on YouTube, so we hope you join us for that as well. Obviously going to have a lot of coverage as we continue to learn more about the California arson suspect arrested in Florida and in court today in Orlando. And as Randy told us, we'll be back in court tomorrow, so we'll have more on that tomorrow as well. Thanks for joining us. We are out of time, but I will leave you with this view of the federal courthouse in downtown Orlando.